Get started right into the questions because we want to get as much from our industry experts out here. So what's the hardest part? And this is for all the panelists, just one sentence. What's the hardest part of getting AI out of pilot and into production in your organizations? Let's start with you, Iyad.
All right. I would say the hardest part would probably be just make sure you have robust data readiness processes, make sure, again, you have the right people, process, technology to really drive and scale AI and AI use cases.
Absolutely. Dave?
I'd say the hardest part is getting through the architectural gates. Specifically, I think security is the one that gives us the most trouble.
We use models that are core and critical for the business. So any mistakes that these models make can make a difference in tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's extremely critical that we understand the risks, the limitations, and all the governance and controls required for this. That takes typically the largest amount of time from moving from pilot to production.
Yeah, I will echo Dave and Santosh's point on security, governance, and compliance.
Okay, lovely. So I'm going to start off with my first question for you, Dave. What does a production-ready ML model mean in your world? And what check boxes did teams skip in early pilots that came back to bite them?
So I think production-ready means you're ready to support it in production. So that means all of the bells and whistles that go along with what does it mean when something runs in production? So you're looking at your infrastructure, you're looking for your support, your maintenance, how you're actually going to use it and support it going on. So classically, you might write a run book or an ORAT or a document that basically says, what is this production thing? And to be production ready, you have to be thinking in this way. So once I turn this on, how are the user going to access it? Are you going to add them to an AD group? Who's going to maintain that? How are you going to clean up users? How are you going to correct bugs? If you have a CI/CD pipeline, implemented, then who's going to own bug fixes and whatnot. And I think where I've been burned in the past is when if you take something that's really not ready for production. And I think so. AI is the gold rush, right? Like everyone's like, go AI this, and you build something, and then you have something. But to get that into production, what that means is who's going to do all of that extra work? And so, without having an ORAT, without having it written down, GenAI is great for, producing documentation to write it down, but without having that, all of the people in place that sign up to say, I'm going to support this, I'm going to, I'll maintain the users, I'm going to look for exception logs, I'm going to monitor this for problems, without all of that in place, then it's not going to work.
That's great. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, the way I look at AI is really it's a system no different than you would be introducing, let's say a new CRM system, new ERP system. You really want to make sure that you productionize it and operationalize it in a way where you do have all those roles and responsibilities defined. You make sure that there's proper observability, whether it's data observability, AI observability, everything in place so people aren't scrambling. Again, you have your EIM processes set up, so incident management. If things aren't going according to your expectations, then who's supposed to jump in and start to do some of the root cause analysis and investigation to get things back on track? So yeah, I think a lot of people just look at it, okay, we're just deploying this AI and not really having a lot of those guardrails or looking at it in the same way that they would be whether they were implementing a large-scale system within their enterprise. So again, having app ops, having all the proper infrastructure and support teams, understanding the AI, what it does, having the runbooks in place, and then really making sure that everybody signs off, understands what they're supposed to do in case any sort of incident or issue arises as a result of whether data not feeding the AI, maybe there's an issue where the data's not coming in, or maybe even your AI, just from an AI observability, there's some bias that's thrown in or some hallucinations. So just making sure you have all the checks and balances in place.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I'm actually going to ask the next question to Santosh and Ali. Model versioning and rollback sound straightforward in theory. What's a real scenario where you had to roll back a model in production, and what did that process reveal?
Great question. So when we say model versioning, now a model is typically a bunch of artifacts. You have the model object, the encoders, the associated thresholds, the monitoring, the configurations, and settings. So the entire package, you can say that that is a version of a model, and that goes to production. Now, typically, if it's a very critical workload, we would have done an immense amount of testing and validation before it goes into production. Now, first, the feeling you get is if something breaks in production, that's major disbelief that how did this happen? After so much testing and validation, something like this happened. So I think one real example that we felt was we had done all the testing. The model was supposed to go live, and it went live, and we started getting 400 series errors, that there were some issues with the model. Like, how is that even possible? We tested extensively. Then, during our investigations, we found that somebody accidentally corrupted some of the model artifacts. I think that is where the biggest risk is. You have a bunch of artifacts, so it's not just one object, it's a bunch of things, and anything can get corrupted. And then the rollback procedure, it was panic, and it took us a lot of efforts to roll back. Now, what we learned from that is it's not just the deployment that is important, having a detailed plan about how are you going to roll back that, how are you going to detect an incident. All that is extremely important. That gives you more confidence to do more deployments frequently and handle these kind of situations.
Ali, what are your thoughts?
So for MLOps, there are three things, which is data, your training pipeline, and your inference pipeline. And for production rollbacks, you want to look at three. If you have model promotion versus code promotion techniques, you want to look at holistically, and it's just not a matter of rolling back a PR, but also, as Santosh mentioned, all of the model artifacts, your feature store, so that you're looking at your data, which is feature store, your training pipeline, and inference pipeline. So looking at it as a whole.
That's great. And governance has been the theme out here, at the conference, and we have heard a lot of governance, compliance, security. So my next question is going to be around that. I'm going to start with you, Iyad, and I would like all the panelists to pitch in on this one. Governance and speed feel like opposites, but the best teams make them work together. What's one governance practice you've embedded into the AI lifecycle that accelerated delivery rather than slowing it down?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, and again, there's a few things that we're doing on that front. So when it comes to AI tooling, for example, we have a data and AI risk assessment, and we work very closely with our stakeholders. We're very heavily regulated, so we'll work with risk, compliance, privacy, security. We'll work and data governance typically drives this process. So we'll try to make sure that everybody has a really good understanding up front what this tool is, what it does, where the data resides, where it doesn't reside, and the types of use cases that it would potentially drive. And then we also have, once we do get to the use case stage, we have, again, the data governance team, they have a process where we would log the various use cases that would come our way just to make sure that, again, because I'm sure everybody has this today where everybody wants to do AI across the organization, and we don't want people doing a bunch of different things, in different ways. So we're really trying to standardize the approach and how we do things as much as possible. And, if there's a certain use case that we pre-vet, then it'll make it faster the next time around when somebody wants to do something similar to say, hey, we've vetted this type of use case, yeah, you should be good to go. Again, there's, typically nuances with the different use cases, but that's what we've tried to do, and just in terms of partnering with all of our kind of risk and security stakeholders, and making sure that we vet a lot of these use cases up front versus having to deal with issues or risks downstream, which could jeopardize our reputation and have a number of other implications.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. So key takeaway out here is have your use cases vetted and make sure that we have our compliance and regulatory partners happy. So on that note, Dave, how about you?
I think data governance gets a bad rap. And I think it's because people think of data governance like, oh, this is going to slow me down. Oh, I got to go through this process. Oh, now I have to do this. It's going to take 2 weeks. And the impression is that data governance is this overhead that creates this problem. And this is a fundamental issue that we have to resolve as experts in data. And what we have to bring to the discussion is data governance is important. It brings quality. It brings auditability. And the processes that it brings will carry forward that in a way that everyone can see and build trust. And the way that you get to expedite, the way that you get to fast, is not by avoiding data governance. It's by doing data governance right, but then establishing reusable patterns that you can then leverage data governance in a much faster way. So when I establish a pattern that I'm going to call an LLM through Microsoft Foundry because I know it's in my Azure domain, and I'm happy with that, and I'm happy that I'm already running an OpenAI model in there that I'm pleased with, that I'm going to use the security context, I'm going to pass in an authorization token, and I've solved that problem, and data governance has run through the gates and said, this is an acceptable pattern to solve this problem. Then the next 20 projects that come along and have to solve that problem, they don't wait 3 weeks.
Right.
Because that would be the delay. They look at the pattern, they say, I'm going to solve it the same way that I know you've already approved, and that's where you get your scale. That's where you get your economy of scale, and you deliver faster.
Absolutely. Santosh.
To add to maybe what Dave said, the key question here is how do we go as quickly as possible from idea to value? Because AI, machine learning, helps us unlock tremendous amount of value. Now, if we don't have governance, compliance, controls in place, we will be distracted. Most of the time, the data scientists or DevOps or MLOps engineers, their time that's spent is on low-value work, troubleshooting, and instead of focusing on solving problems that add value to the business. So governance really helps us go as fast as possible from idea to value, and I think that's the key to unlock value.
And finally, Ali.
Yeah, I'll just double down on what Dave said, that you cannot build governance without building reproducible artifacts. Whether it is data quality pipelines, infrastructure as code, your CI/CD pipelines, different environments. And that's one. Two, you can't allow your data scientists to use Jupyter notebooks, just run once in a while code. It has to be reproducible artifacts. And your integration test, your testing, has to be part of your CI/CD pipeline. Without that, you would never be able to build governance later on.
Okay, thank you. So let's go on to scaling AI. So Dave, this question's for you. Scaling AI isn't just about infrastructure. It's about scaling teams and processes and organizational trust at the same time. And again, trust has been one of the themes that we've been hearing over and over in our presentations out here. What's the biggest non-technical barrier you have hit when trying to expand AI from one use cases to many?
You literally asked me the hardest question.
Yes, absolutely.
So ask a technical person and the non-technical answer. So what I'm going to say is what you've been hearing all day today. So trust is the barrier to adoption. But let's just open our eyes and look at what's in front of us. We are being bombarded with reasons to mistrust. So for example, I can take the exact same identical prompt, fire it concurrently at an LLM, and I'm going to get 2 different responses. Because that's the nature of the LLM. Its reasoning logic will not guarantee the same response over and over again. It's also wrong often. And the way that you make it right is you have to ground it. You have to give it context. You provide further context. So if you are someone whose job is to test an LLM, to develop prompts, you will develop a lot of mistrust. And when you tell people, and the gold rush happens, the CIO says, everybody do AI, well, the first thing they're going to realize is that I don't trust it because it's wrong a lot. Mm-hmm. So this is a problem. This is a real problem that we face. And so trust, I would say, building trust does not come from just saying, believe me. It doesn't come from just saying, it's right this time, even though you know it's been wrong another time. It's about acknowledging, yes, it is wrong when it doesn't have enough context. It is wrong. Here's how we make it right. And here's how we take your example and your example, and you work with people to help them ground their LLM activity, and so it does become more accurate, recognizing that it's a problem, but it does get better. So I think we can do better in that. And I think the classic problem of scale is a much more fun technical challenge because you can look at bandwidth and throughput and concurrency, and you could look at some of the data repositories that were up here, and immediately you can look at that and say, well, I know I can't put more than 200 concurrent requests against that. So as an architect, you gravitate towards, well, I can solve these problems because I know how to solve technical problems. But the trust is a big one. But I will close just by saying, I don't think the answer is to ignore it, and I don't think the answer is to say, believe me. I think the answer is to accept it. AI is wrong a lot, but here's how we make it better. We make it more accurate by grounding.
And just basically work together and make it happen.
Yes.
Ian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree again with Dave. I think a lot of it goes back to education. I think as he was alluding to, just education, aligning on expectations, and then really making sure, because again, you can say, yeah, let's do this and we'll move really fast. But again, it goes back to some of the previous points we were talking about around you also need to help people understand that, again, this is pretty much like a system that you're implementing. So you want to make sure that you have the right checks and balances and guardrails in place. And again, I think you do need to also continuously improve, right? So I think that some of the things that we've done on our team, this is more from a technical perspective. So we had about close to 400 data pipelines, between import, export, data readiness checks. So my team actually came up with a new framework using a parameterized approach where we took those 378 pipelines to be exact, brought them down to about 30 using a parameterized model with control and configuration tables. So I think you also have to make sure that continuous improvement is also ingrained as part of the way that you do things.
Yeah. And okay, so I'm going to now move on to
Sorry, guys.
Ali. Okay, so Ali, bias in production models is a serious operational and reputational risk, especially in financial services. What does responsible bias monitoring look like in practice, not just at launch, but ongoing? And Ali and Santosh, if you could take this one on.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So we are in the financial services business. So for us, bias, detection of bias, ensuring fairness is extremely important. So the way we approach this is when we are developing models, any fields or any features that are deemed sensitive, that is completely removed. So we have a policy which dictates which fields can be used and which cannot be used. So those can be easily removed. What we feel is much harder is unintended bias. Bias that may already be in the data, because if it's historical data dating 10, 15, 20 years ago where there were different policies, there could be unintended bias. So how do you detect that? So that is during development, that is one challenge. When we deploy the model, we have created baselines where we see whether when the model is used in production in a live environment, we check for a certain cohort, what is the expected rate at which the approvals or declines are happening. And if the declines are happening for certain cohorts at much higher rates than expected, so we apply corrections there itself. That ensures that bias is detected and fairness is ensured both during development and during production.
Yeah, just to add to it, observability and monitoring. In data, your data quality pipelines, your data ingestion pipelines, in training, your model training metrics, and then inference, your model drift. And holistically looking at it, we can manage that. So it's an ops problem rather than a model training problem.
Okay, lovely. I'm actually going to ask this question to all the panelists. So what is the one thing you wish you'd done earlier when operationalizing AI? What's that wish we had built this from day one moment that you have had?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it would really be understanding what that runbook looks like. So when you do productionize AI, again, what are the roles, responsibilities? What's the different type of monitoring we need to do? Who's doing what? So I think really having that defined, as well as defined SLAs around when there are issues. What does that look like? So I think having that kind of production-ready operationalization framework in place. It would definitely help out quite a bit.
Amazing.
So I like I like thinking of AI like a gold rush because it's it's like everybody gets a hint of what it is, and then they think they know, and then they run and they try and solve all these problems, and executives create these problems. And if I look back and think, what do I wish we would have done right? I look back at all the ways that we solved problems that weren't based on an established framework that I like. And so for anyone that was in the IBM discussion, that was the first time I was seeing that, and I was nodding my head thinking, exactly. And Google has, so Gemini Enterprise, they have the Vertex Model Garden. If you get in there, you can light up whatever models you want. Google hosts them. You have a whole framework plus Model Armor. Microsoft has the Foundry. You can host models. You actually have the guardrails for security. If instead of letting people just go independently solve problems, because now executives have lit in a fire and said, go solve AI problems, if you got into a framework where you have these guardrails, so a simple thing like what Microsoft and Google provide is you can turn on a setting that looks at the prompts that go to the LLM, and you can decide which prompts should be stripped out and sent back to the user for a concern. So an example might be if you send a credit card or a SIN number, then the logic will tell you, you shouldn't put that at the LLM. There's reasons why you might want to do that. If I could rewind the clock and say, do the one thing, I would say, bet the farm on one of the frameworks from the leading vendor, instead of sort of opening up the kimono and just letting everybody solve AI problems independently.
Yeah, I think if I can go back in time, this is what I think about. So when we started out developing these models, we took an approach where the data scientist, based on their expertise and knowledge, uses the technologies, processes, and develops and deploys the models themselves. So every data scientist would take a different approach in building and deploying these models. Now, then we went into we got into a place where scaling the data science practice became a very big problem, and we partnered with Ali and team, and we were able to develop an enterprise-grade capability to build something where a data scientist is not just restricted to building one model. We are at a place where a data scientist can build 4 or 5 models. Now, if we had made those investments in scaling our data science practice, setting up an enterprise-grade MLOps framework, we could extract more value from AI and from machine learning. And I think if I go back in time, I would have made these investments much, much earlier.
Yeah, and I would add to it that we must innovate with reproducible patterns, reproducible artifacts, and having some sort of governance with number of tools and technologies and programming language you will use. And that, down the road, will make productionizing any type of work you're doing very, very easy.
Okay, and I'm going to add this question before we open it up to the audience. So as companies scale AI, we have spoken about accountability, creating value, ownership, not just with the data scientists, but business owners as well. We have a lot of AI models, so we have governance, security, compliance. What is that one thing that you would give the audience, and as they scale in their different industries, what's the one thing that you would say is the most important thing that one needs to focus on amongst all of this that we have discussed today? So actually, I'm going to start with Ali.
I think of it 3 things: people, product, and processes. And either you're strong in one area or you're weak, and if you identify which one of those 3 areas and then focus on that, that would be my quick thought here.
Santosh?
I think it's about handling change. We are in an environment where all these items are changing very, very rapidly. A framework or a pattern we used a few months ago may become obsolete very, very quickly. So I think investing in training, ability to handle change, I think that is an extremely valuable area to invest in.
Dave?
I'm going to give this in multiple
Yep.
parts. Okay, so the first part is, if you work with AI, you will become incredibly valuable as you understand what its limitations are, how to make it more accurate, how to extend it with what you know. So bringing your value to the table, to that equation, grounding it by what you bring to the table. So I understand a lot of algorithms and financial definitions. I can bring that to the LLM as a piece of grounding information, and then the LLM is going to respond better. So what I'm able to bring adds value. You add value. So if you're developing AI, you're asked to use AI, I would strongly recommend you invest the time to figure out how you can add your specific knowledge and your value to that. And grounding is something to understand about the LLMs. Each one has a different mechanism, so I won't tote one over another, but that's something to spend time on. If I was a vendor, there's a couple of huge opportunities, and I see them so clearly, and someone should jump on this. First of all, companies are lighting up chat UI interfaces, Copilot, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and there's Mistral. There's so many more, and they open up a UI, and a user can interact with it. So imagine a company now has an interface, and you're selling your product, and all you have to do to make it available to that company is expose the interface to that chat UI. So MCP is an absolute game changer. So if you don't already know how to expose your value through MCP, do it. If you can expose your value through MCP, imagine the user base. So this is massive. The other thing I'll say is I see a huge opportunity in explaining data to users. So we do tremendous work to build reports. We build dashboards. We map data in semantic layers. So where I am, we have thousands of tables and tremendous work, tremendous man hours to explain table relationships. There is not a single tool out there yet that I can see that can match the value of being able to build an intelligent query just like an analyst to get the data you need reliably. However, they all solve the problem a little bit. And by solving it a little bit, it makes you believe, well, if I get on board, then it's going to get better. The closest thing I've seen is Looker has the Google product, Looker, has a way that you can map your database in LookML. So you take an ERD, and you're basically mapping the relationships. And then when a user asks a question, first of all, security is applied with the Google level with an Explorer, which is like a collection, which is nice. But then it allows the LLM to build a query based on the user's knowledge of that mapping. And so there's great potential there, but it still doesn't crack the nut. So as a vendor, I think there's an awesome opportunity to solve that space really well for any database. Because every connector that I've seen that connects to a database, they basically just lightly touch the surface of solving one problem and then create more mistrust as every single question returns the wrong answer. So
Thank you. And yeah,
I'll keep it brief.
Yep.
So for me, really, it's just around, no, sorry, no, that wasn't a jab or anything. But it's more around, again, I'll just go back. I have some friends in the professional services industry and consulting friends and colleagues, and they'll go into companies and they'll tell me, the companies want, these 7 AI use cases to be lit up, but then because of their lack of data readiness, they're only able to do maybe 3 or 4, so they can't, tackle everything they want. So for me, it just comes back down to data readiness and making sure that you have the proper ingredients to be able to, create and scale AI within an organization.
Perfect. And we actually have a question from our virtual audience. The online question is, what's one lesson you wish you knew before taking your first ML system to production? Who would like to take this up? Okay, go for it, Santosh.
Great. I think we should, one lesson would be an ML system, if we see maybe the very first iteration, the very first version that goes to production, it typically maybe captures only 50-60% of the business problem, whatever the value we're trying to capture, right? Now, I think the key there is these systems will be continuously, iteratively improved, right? This is not the last version that we are building. So ensuring that the data pipelines, the code, everything that was built in such a way that it can evolve over time, so that when the business needs changes or users needs changes, we can iteratively keep improving it, and the cycle becomes faster and faster. I think that investing in scalability, I think, would be a very important lesson for me.
Okay.
Shadow mode deployments, that is huge, so that your whole pipeline runs, as Santosh was saying, your inference runs, but the last transaction, for example, if you're calculating a property valuation, it does not get committed to the application. So the whole thing, and you could see it running, and then flip of a button, it's a Boolean variable, you could deploy it. So deploying in shadow mode in production, I have deployed many ML models, and that works every time. You can troubleshoot a lot of problems beforehand.
Okay, we are at time, and we do not want to keep you away from lunch. So if you do have any other questions, please find them in the lunch hour. But I want to give our panelists a big round of applause for their insights on our discussion today. Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.